So I wanted a leather bracelet that looked nice, but also was functional when building and making things. So that's what I'm doing today. I began with cutting up some pretty thin, like 4-ounce veg tanned leather into strips. I need 2 strips, one narrow and one wider, and the narrow one needs to be just wide enough to fit small, rare earth magnets in the middle. And the wider one I cut to a width that seems perfect to have on my wrist. And here's kind of the concept, one on top of the other. I'm using an oil dye here to color the leather. And I've been playing around with different dyes lately, and while I like the water-based dyes a lot, there's just something about the oil-based one which I really like. Once dry, I formed it around my wrist and cut to size, with a little extra to spare. Now I'm using 5 magnets here, so just measuring where I want them on the narrow strip, and then I punch some holes. So first I punched all the holes with the biggest punch I have, which still was a touch too small to fit the magnet in. So then I very carefully punched around the edges until the magnet just fit. Here I'm marking a line for the stitches and then punching the holes in the spaces between where the magnets will go. Then I set that aside and worked on the clasp. So I decided to use a riveted snap here in silver to match the magnets. And I've been familiarizing myself with these riveted snaps lately, and I've messed up quite a few. And I realized that it's important to use the metal plate underneath for the concave tops, and also to punch down with authority to get a good fit. I'm also adding a loop for the end to slip into to keep the closure nice and tight. So now, when the closure is in and the top leather is punched and ready, it's time to combine the two. So first I'm adding some rubber cement to connect them. Now I punch the holes again to go through the back piece as well before sewing it together. And I decided to go with contrasting stitching here, so using a natural hemp thread. For the longest time I really didn't like contrasting stitching, but now when working with leather, I think the stitches deserve to be highlighted sometimes. I don't know, it's part of the craft, which I really like. Once the 2 pieces were sewed in place, it was time to glue the magnets in. And for this I used epoxy, because I really want to make sure they stay in place, and you can't beat epoxy for that. Lastly, I'm using a top coat to seal the dye into the leather to protect it. Okay, so here it is. So apart from looking like a pretty neat bracelet, this one is also quite practical when doing any sort of building or making. These magnets are surprisingly powerful and can hold quite a few screws or nails, which I think will really come in handy for future projects. Apart from holding larger fasteners, another thing that I'm excited about is using this bracelet when working in the tinker area to hold these tiny little screws and washers for electronics projects, because those little guys always tend to disappear, and now I'll know exactly where they are. So what do you guys think? Would you change something? Of course, you can alter the look of this, the material, the style, anything you'd like. I just think it's kind of cool that it's something nice to wear that's also super practical. So thanks for watching. Also thanks to my patrons for being super supportive. And I'll leave a link in the description to my Patreon campaign as well as to the products that I used if anyone wants to make their own. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks for watching and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!